Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Women's Health Unwrapped. Now, you're listening to this on possibly the 1st of April if you've come to the podcast on the release date, or maybe early in April, which means we've already passed the first quarter of 2025. Can you believe it? So I thought what I would do at the beginning of today's episode, something a little bit different to what I would usually do, is to just get you to check in with yourself and how you feel at this point in the year. We're in the start of spring, possibly, depending where you're listening to this from, and maybe you've come to this much later in 2025. But if you are listening to it in real time, then we're in April, we're in early spring, we have the rest of the year ahead of us, and perhaps like many people, you started out 2025 with very clear goals and desires about the way you wanted to feel this year. And I want you to check in on how close you are to feeling those things. The things you thought about as you perhaps wrapped up 2024 or started out the new year in January and looked ahead to and thought, yeah, I want that for myself. Perhaps it's feeling more strong physically, mentally, emotionally even. And especially if you're navigating perimenopause or menopause, that could be really relevant. So challenge yourself to reflect on what you thought about achieving and changing in your life and where you are at this point in the year. Because I don't know about you, but for me, I really feel as though the beginning of this year has gone at lightning speed. And I know there's this thought process that the older you get, the faster time seems to move. Now, time's relative, isn't it? It is what it is. And our perception of time certainly, I think, adds a factor, an element to how quick or slow we feel it's going. But for me, I feel as though it's gone really fast. And if you are like me and feel that way, then possibly the year's running away with itself, a bit like a train without a driver. And that could mean that you aren't where you want to be. And there's therefore that risk that you're going to run through the rest of the year at that kind of pace and wave life and get to the end of the year and go, oh God, I didn't focus on that, or I didn't manage to do that. And I really wish that I had made this the year I do those things I want. So take this as a little dose of coaching, accountability, and inspiration to get really intentional about where you go from this point in the year. And for me, that is really focusing on overall strength in every way. I want to feel strong. And even if I'm still experiencing some menopausal symptoms, that's okay, because if I feel strong, I'm in control, and that makes such a difference, especially from a mindset perspective, to how I'm going to feel, navigating those symptoms and the other life challenges that come our way. So that's enough of the coaching talk. It's time to get into the episode. And this is one that I've really wanted to bring for some time because of the different guests I've had. I've just not gotten around to recording it. So it's a solo episode, and I'm really excited to dive into a topic which is very special to me in lots of ways, but also is very, very important and relevant to every single one of us who are born female. And that's movement. Now, I don't want you to be rolling your eyes and maybe letting out a sigh and going, oh God, exercise. Oh, I hate exercise. I've never been any good at it. I hate going to the gym. Well, stay tuned, because I'm about to challenge all of that and help you to reframe those thoughts if that's what you're thinking. Now, movement, and I'm going to keep calling it movement, not exercise, and I'll explain why, is one of my 5 pillars of wellness. I have a framework that I use whether I'm working with individual clients or running corporate sessions, which is essentially 5 circles. One is in the middle, mindset, and the other 4 overlap mindset, but they all overlap one another in that middle. There's a point where, everything is interconnected. And the other 4 pillars after mindset are movement, nutrition, sleep, and stress. Because those 5 pillars for me are really the core building blocks to having strong health and well-being. Movement is vital in so many ways to more than just our health. It really does impact our overall well-being. Now, for me, I talk about movement being my cornerstone habit. This is something I work on with my one-to-one clients to really identify, like, what's that one thing you're looking to have in your life that will become almost your key, like, it's the one habit you wouldn't be without. It defines who you are, essentially. It's like all of our habits make up our identity, but this cornerstone habit is like really at the crux of who you are, and without it you'd feel pretty lost. And for me, that's movement. Now, I wasn't somebody who would have expected to be saying that, especially at almost 50. In fact, April is my birthday month and I'll be celebrating my 49th birthday. I really can't believe that, but that's another topic altogether. So at this age, I wouldn't have expected to be saying that, because when I was a child, PE, sport were things that weren't for me. I did not possess any natural skill, ability, flair, interest, fitness. My fitness level was pretty dire. And so for me, I just did what I had to do when I was at school. I did actually join the netball team, and I was goal defence initially, and then I became goal attack because somehow I was able to shoot. I'm not sure how, but that was quite a short-lived talent, shall we say, if we can call it that. And when I moved to secondary school, I definitely didn't make the team there because, primary school was a little bit different. It was easier to appear to have some kind of talent. So, for me, movement, exercise just wasn't really part of who I was. However, when I got into my 20s, I joined a gym, and it was because I thought I needed to lose weight to fix what was wrong with me. Now, I've spoken openly about my mental health struggles, especially around anxiety. And for me, movement was something that I did, or going to the gym back then. That's how I'd talk about it. I'm going to the gym. Movement was something that was a way to achieve an outcome, and the outcome was to lose weight, look a certain way, feel confident, lose the anxiety, panic, worry, catastrophizing that I had going on. And it wasn't something I did with ease. I'd have to force myself. I didn't really enjoy it. It wasn't something I did regularly. Like a lot of people, I'd dip in and dip out. And that kind of went on for a few years. And at that point, I was living in the south of England. I moved back up north and got a job with Nike in early 2001. And that was a bit ironic because I wasn't a sports person, and I certainly didn't call myself an athlete. Now, as Nike say, if you have a body, you are an athlete. And actually, I do believe that. But when I joined the company, that wasn't what I thought. And I didn't join the company enthused about suddenly being in the sports industry. It was a job. I was 25, nearly. I needed a job. I'd relocated from the south back up to where I'm from in the northeast, and that was what it was about. And so I entered this world of people who were, not everyone, but I would say the majority were moving their body in some way. Some of them had been professional athletes, some had been semi-professional, some had gone through school and university, playing sport as a teen non-professionally, and continued that as an adult. And I felt a bit out of it. I didn't fit with that way of being, being passionate about playing sport. Now, I will add, although I would say I wasn't a sporty person, I really enjoyed football, and I used to go to football matches very regularly, really until I had Lois, and then life changed. And so apart from football, I wasn't really passionate about any other sports. I did like to watch things like Wimbledon, the tennis and the Olympics, I loved athletics, actually, watching that when it came around, but that was only that big event every 4 years. But certainly from a participation perspective, no, that was not for me. So my personal movement story has been maybe like many people's. However, mine took a new perspective at a certain point in time. Now, this didn't happen initially when I worked at Nike. We had a gym at work, and back when I started, we had multiple classes with instructors a week. We did body attack, body pumps, step aerobics, boxing. It evolved over the years, and it was a lunchtime and everyone would go, and it was a bit of a camaraderie thing. And that actually played a key role in helping me to get moving, because everyone else was doing it. And so, I went into the gym and did these classes, and it was quite fun on the whole. But it was hard work. And if something came up that meant I didn't need to go, like, oh, I must pop to Morrison's to get a bit of food shopping, or someone suggested we'll go to the pub for a bit of a team lunch, then yes, that was what was chosen over working out. So it wasn't that I fell in love with exercise and movement at all. That took quite a number of years. I dipped in and out of movement, and when I was pregnant, I swam. I didn't do any exercise. I wasn't a walker back then. I wasn't someone who would say, right, I'm going to get out for a walk. Maybe we might go for a walk on a weekend, but not to walk as such. It was more to go somewhere like the beach or the park, especially when Lowe's was a baby, and in the pushchair, the kinds of things you generally do when you have a young infant. But it wasn't that I was doing it from a mindset of I love to walk, I love to be moving my body. That changed when I started the body coach plan. Initially, I started it with someone who'd paid to do it, and off the record, she shared it with me in 2016. And I found this person who I really resonated with, Joe Wicks, the body coach, and started to do a lot of his free workouts on YouTube, which back then there were very few. He was quite new into the space. And for the first time ever, I remember we went on holiday to Disney World, Florida, and I worked out on holiday to Joe Wicks in the gym at the hotel, on top of doing all of those steps around the Disney parks, I will add. Something had started to click. I was enjoying the type of way I moved doing his workouts. And this was after years of having so many different experiences with different fitness instructors at Nike, because we were very lucky to get the best kinds of people coming in to our workplace, but also at events. And, when we were away at different conferences, we'd have brilliant trainers who were global icons back then, even before, the whole influencer world took over. But something changed. And then in early 2017, I joined his plan legitimately. And again, the route, the route I was on was to lose weight. That was the ultimate goal. Let's fix what is wrong with me by losing weight. But something really changed through that process. The type of workouts I was doing, they were really hard, but it was much more based around the strength workout, especially in the second phase of the program. And although I'd lifted weights and I'd done lots of different types of strength workouts, I hadn't really done anything in this way. And that for me became the starting point of what I didn't realise was my health transformation story. Because I realised for the first time ever that I didn't want to be on a diet, that I didn't need to be on a diet, and that moving my body in the way I was actually making me feel pretty good, because I was building strength mentally and physically. Now, it didn't fix my anxiety. I was still very anxious, but something had improved in how I felt. Something did change. I did have a physical transformation. I'll own up to that. I didn't necessarily lose a lot of pounds on the scale, but I did lose inches, but I became very strong. I had some defined muscles. Our build, I think, determines how we look, even when we are strength training. For me, I've got that kind of quite medium type of build as a woman. pretty broad shoulders and back, quite rounded arms. I have a bust and hips and a bit of a tummy, and, I'm certainly not a slim woman by definition, but I looked pretty good and I felt good. I had much better mental clarity, my moods improved, energy levels, confidence certainly improved. So that was the beginning of me falling in love with movement. And like I say, if you told me at 16, even 26, that's where I would be 20 years later, no chance would I have believed that. Now I'm going to move on a bit from that story and my experience. I will bring a little bit more in about my story as we go through the rest of the episode. But I want to jump into now movement and midlife, because it is so important to move in midlife and perimenopause. This phase of life really does need to have adjustments made in terms of how we move, because our body is changing. Perhaps what served us before in terms of that approach with excessive cardio or just lots of cardio, maybe at a lower intensity, like the treadmill walking, just gently cycling on a bike, reading a magazine. Yes, I've seen plenty of people like that in the gym. Or the really impact heavy type of exercise, lots of high intensity jumping and so on, as we used to call it. Nike and other classes I've been to, being beasted. It's like, I'm going to the gym, and if I don't get beasted, then what was the point in going? I want to be on the floor, feeling like I'm dying, not able to breathe and sweating. That's what a workout means. But in midlife, perhaps that no longer serves you in the way it did before. Midlife is about finding what works for you and being very intentional with forms of exercise like resistance training. So that's where we're putting resistance against our bodies to break down the muscle fibers we have to build new, stronger muscle. That is really important. We need to protect our muscle and also to help protect our bone density so that we have strong bones. 1 in 2 women will be diagnosed with osteoporosis, and it is very risky to have those osteoporosis related breaks. Hip fractures are very common in women, and within 12 months your risk of death increases exponentially if you have osteoporosis. So we really want to protect ourselves, and resistance training, whether it's using your body weight, weights like dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells, bands, machines in a gym, all of those methods, including some kind of yoga and Pilates potentially. However, I think there's a limit to how much you can progress to build stronger, more strength with those forms of movement. So being really intentional with bringing something like that into your life, and then the cardio element, but building that around things that bring your heart rate up, not too high, so that we're not releasing lots of cortisol and adrenaline, which can counterbalance what we're trying to do with our hormonal balance. So, walking, hiking, spinning, maybe some rowing, maybe sports, even netball could be great, and so on. So I'm going to come a little bit more onto that. But I want to talk about why movement is medicine. Now, in my story, it really did become the catalyst to improving my mental health, which was the biggest challenge I had with my health. I did have some physical health problems, but my mental health really shifted through moving my body in a way that worked for me. And strength training was a core element of that approach to improving my mental well-being. Lots of evidence now shows the benefits of moving your body, of exercising in lots of different ways. And something that I watched a long time ago on a YouTube video with Dr. James Levine was him talking about how dangerous it is to not be moving, which is where we are as a society and culture generally, especially in the Western world. And he quotes, "Sitting is more dangerous than smoking." And many of us sit for the majority of our waking hours, and then our non-waking hours we're lying down in bed. So we really need to think about moving, because that's what we've been designed to do as humans, but moving in a way that supports us in midlife and menopause, because I want to get to my 90s and still be able to get up and down from a chair on my own. I would still like to be driving, actually. I would like to carry my shopping bags. I would like to be able to bend, to clean, to pick things up. Grandchildren, great grandchildren, maybe by then, although Laura says she doesn't want any children, so we'll have to see about that. But you get where I'm going. I want to be independent. I want to feel that I'm thriving still when I am in my 80s, in my 90s. And movement is the medicine for that. It's more than about the medicine of feeling good now. It is you investing in your future self. And I love this kind of scene we have on social media about strong over skinny, and I'm building my old lady body and all those kinds of things, which I think is so inspiring for us to think about. And a key message with this as well is you can start at any age. So maybe you've had a bit of a history like me, a love-hate relationship, and you've worked out just because you think it's going to help you lose weight. As a little side note, there is lots of proof that exercise does not lead to weight loss. That is a complicated discussion, one that I've heard lots of specialists and experts talk about. Yes, it can help if you are focusing on improving your diet, but on its own, and even, the part that exercise plays doesn't guarantee or prove in most instances that you are going to lose weight. So if you have been like me in the past doing it for those reasons, it's time to switch your mindset. It's time to understand why it's movement over exercise. Coach yourself on that if you can't afford to work with somebody like myself, and really switch your attitude to it to see the benefit, to see how it's going to help you to enjoy the rest of your life. But also, very importantly, reduce menopause symptoms if you're already in perimenopause. Even eradicate symptoms. And if you're before this stage of life, all the better, because there is now evidence showing that you can prevent lots of symptoms of menopause, as well as massively reduce your risk of all-cause mortality, which means death from anything. So you are guaranteed to reduce your risk of dementia, which is the biggest killer of women in England and has been since 2011. Cardiovascular disease, which is the biggest killer of women globally and the biggest health risk we face as women. Osteoporosis risk reduced. Parkinson's, MS, many other autoimmune conditions which are significantly increasing in women and are much heavier in women than men, like lots of those illnesses and diseases. Dementia, 2 out of 3 people diagnosed will be women. We can reduce our risk, ladies, of all of those different illnesses and diseases, which together are the biggest killers of women globally. Lots of cancers too. So this is me passionately telling you that if you have been someone who is either A, exercised only because it was a route to the weight loss goal you had, or B, because you just thought, well, I have to do it, but I really hate it, but I've heard that it's, supposed to be good for you, it's time to change. It's time to embrace the fact that you can move. Because something else I did want to share is through my journey with movement, I've had a couple of significant problems with my physical health that meant I couldn't move. I broke my wrist during the pandemic pretty badly, and I was in a cast for quite a few weeks. I couldn't drive for, I think it was 11 weeks. We was still in lockdown for some of that time. It was really difficult. And I hated not being able to move. And for at least 6 months after that break, I could not do a press up even on all fours because of the pain in my wrist. Now, I have very limited movement in this left wrist. The flex in it is terrible. I have regular pain in the thumb, the padding of my hand, a lot of discomfort, and so on. And I hate the fact that has happened because your grip strength is actually one of the biggest indicators of longevity. Believe it or not, we need a strong grip. And Peter Attia talks a lot about this. If you haven't watched his Netflix documentary with the very easy on the eye Chris Hemsworth, watch that. Actually, I don't think it's on Netflix. It might be on Disney Plus. Shout out if you can't find it. I can't remember what it's called. I had it, but it's gone. Anyway, he's talked a lot about that on podcasts as well. Lots of other doctors mentioned this. So that really hindered my ability to move in a normal way. Even walking for a couple of months was hard because I'd fallen on a walk on my own. I had a lot of nervousness, but also just my whole arm was really uncomfortable to move in any way. So that pushed me out of my usual habits when it comes to movement. And I found that mentally so tough. And then about a year and a half ago, I had quite a significant problem with my back, which went on for almost a year. It's still not perfect, but it is so much better. But that really limited my ability to move. And again, it massively impacted my mental health. When you cannot move freely, you will feel that impact in such a difficult way. It removes the freedom of your life. The pain in itself is obviously something else to deal with, but just the fact that you can't just get up and down or even sit on the toilet with comfort or have a shower or bath, drive, lift your kids, whatever it might be, bend down to do the washing. You know, you might think, well, that's not a bad thing, but there's all of this stuff we take for granted in our lives that when you can't do it, you really value your body and think, I don't want to be in this position again. I don't want to be someone that can't move independently and freely to live my life the way that I want to live. So really think about movement as proactive self-care, as powerful prevention of illness and decline. That's what's so important. Now, I'm going to share just a few little bits from some experts, kind of back up what I'm talking about here. Dr. Stacey Sims is a brilliant exercise physiologist and nutrition scientist, and she emphasises during perimenopause and hormonal fluctuations how our decline in muscle mass and strength really exacerbates, moves at a faster pace. My menopause really does mean that I have these words, I know they're somewhere in my head, but I can't get them out. Anyway, she advocates resistance training with heavy weights. There's a lot of focus on heavy weights in menopause, and that stimulates the nervous system and aids in muscle development. And then we have Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, who is amazing. And I love that she frames muscle as the currency of longevity. If you want to live a long life, but also a long life with health, strength, vitality, you need muscles. There's a direct correlation between the quality of our lives and our muscles. So think about building that muscle mass. Sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle mass, is very common in women as well, especially those who have an early or premature menopause. We need to protect our skeleton. Our bone is rebuilding fully every 10 years, so we need to make sure that we are breaking that muscle down and building it back up, and the bone along with it, because it will help to reduce all of those different mobility and illness challenges that I talked about. So she also talks about how it can change metabolism and reverse insulin resistance, which is very common in women as they navigate perimenopause and menopause, which of course is linked to our changing shape and areas of fat, where we start to carry more fat on our hips and stomach. A lot of that can be related to insulin resistance, which is an output of our changing hormones, and especially the big fluctuations in estrogen and then progesterone. We also have Dr. Vonda Wright, who is amazing. She was recently on Mel Robbins' podcast, and Stephen Bartlett. She's an orthopedic surgeon, and she talks brilliantly about the significance of physical activity in preventing muscle and bone deterioration. And she talks about how we need to adopt those healthy habits, ideally from mid-30s, to really protect our long-term physical well-being. But all of those experts, and there are many more of them, talk about how there is never a point in life where it is too late to start exercising, to start strength training. If you've been someone that's done, the typical kind of Zumba classes or other fitness things and never lifted weights, and you're thinking, well, I can't start now, I'm in my 40s or 50s, that's nonsense. You absolutely can. And there are lots of research projects that prove the benefits that we can see through strength training at any age. And then we have the amazing Dr. Lisa Mosconi, who is a brain expert. She's doing a lot of research into the menopause, brain and Alzheimer's. And she talks about how regular physical activity supports brain health. It increases the blood flow to our brain, which promotes those new neurons, enhances cognitive functions, which are particularly important as our brain is changing through perimenopause and menopause. And we all want to be able to move freely, but also to think with our own mind, don't we? I know that's one of the big fears many of us have. So lots of information out there. I will link to some of these on the podcast episode page on my website. I won't be able to put it all into the notes on Apple or Spotify, but certainly if you go to lifenow.uk/podcast, you'd be able to look at some of what I'm going to share. And one of the things I'm going to share for a bit of inspiration is Train with Joan. Joan is amazing. She has a huge following on Instagram. She started to move in her I think it was early 70s actually, or maybe late 60s. Joan had a lot of health problems. She was obese, pre-diabetic, I think some cardiovascular struggles as well. Her daughter was a trainer, and together they made a plan to help Joan begin to exercise for the first time. And when you see her videos of where she started to where she is now, it is incredible. She's now, I think, late 70s maybe, and she is super fit and most importantly, super strong. She is regularly deadlifting 80 to 100 kilos. Check her out. And Joan posted something recently, which I love, that said, love yourself enough to choose life. And I think that's what this is about. This is a very simple message. I know it's not necessarily easy in the real world, but it is simple to think about it in, terms of how much it is going to benefit the way you feel now and how you are going to live through the rest of your life. Protect your body. That's the key message here. Now, I have lots of things that I can share with you. What I wanted to kind of come to now is that in my story, I decided to become a personal trainer at the age of 45. From someone who hated PE and exercise to someone who is embracing in every way, moving their body and valuing that luxury we have of moving in the way we want to move. So my journey from starting the body coach in 2017 took me to a place where that movement piece I mentioned at the start as my cornerstone habit really became a part of who I was and my personality, my passion, my interest. I need to move, but I wasn't that person before. So if I can do it, you can do it. And I bring that PT element into the coaching I do. I have a fantastic 5-day program, Menopause Boost, Energize and Elevate. If you sign up to my freebie, which is linked to in the notes, you get a 50% off code for Menopause Boost, which means it's only £47.50. And it's 5 days of little training videos and workbooks on mindset, nutrition and movement. And in the movement videos, I've had brilliant feedback from the clients who've gone through the program. They love the fact that I'm really breaking down different types of movement. Strength with body weight, strength with dumbbells. I do some stretching as well, a bit of high impact one for cardio. So lots of kind of starting points in there to get a taste of what it feels like to move in different ways and what you might enjoy. So to wrap up, I just want to recap why movement matters. It is something that is going to pay dividends on the investment you make now. It's going to protect your health in every way in terms of menopausal symptoms as you navigate perimenopause and menopause, feeling mentally, emotionally strong, which I think are both really important in today's world where many of us are super busy, and protecting your physical health and well-being for the rest of your life so that you can live that long, strong life that we all want for ourselves. So I really encourage you to think about how you can start. What could you do in the next 24 hours to get moving in a different way if you're already moving, but to think about what I've shared with the importance of strength training, combining that with different cardio training, and what is that actionable step for building a new habit that you can take on board on the back of listening to this episode to make positive changes in your movement, but also the rest of your life. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any feedback, please share it. I'd love to hear how what I've shared today is going to help you to live longer and stronger.